Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Rover Product Enhancements v5.31, Guest Balance/Guest to Pay field added to Stay Card, bar displays for all room types on availability screen, and more, presented by Stay in Touch Implementation Consultant, Tyrus McGlone. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at Stay in Touch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of the Rover v5.31 product release. In this webinar, we will discuss the guest balance/guest to pay field added to the Stay Card, review how selecting a reservation from the CC transaction screen now directs users to the Stay Card, discover how bar displays for all room types on the availability screen, and explore how applied filters will not reset upon selecting a group and returning to the results screen. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Tyrus, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. All right. Thank you again, Erin, and good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning based on the time of the day that it may be for your area. So as Erin mentioned, I will be going over a few of the releases or a few of the updates that we have brought out in this latest release version 5.31. So the first thing I would like to go over would be the guest balance. So many of you may be familiar with, if you're going to a Stay Card, for example, I'm going to open my arrivals here. If I go to my particular reservation, if I go to the Stay Card, I will actually see this field here that says guest to pay. Previously, this just simply said balance, so it didn't give any inclination of if the guest owes something, or furthermore, if the guest is in-house or if they're an arrival future reservation. If you are an arrival reservation for the day of, or if you have a reservation reserved for some time in the future, this will simply say guest to pay. So basically, this is what the guest is expected to pay based on their projected charges. So room tax and any add-ons that may be attached to that particular reservation. Again, it will always reflect guest to pay if it's an arrival, something that has not checked in. If I come over to one of my stayovers inside of the system, you will see guest balance, which is now reflected, versus guest to pay. You can see here that this reservation actually has a deposit on the reservation. So right now, this is my current balance, which is negative $493, which means I paid a deposit up front typically. And right now, this is basically just a credit. But again, if the reservation is checked in-house, it will, or a checked out reservation, it will reflect guest balance. If it's an arrival reservation or sometime in the future, it's going to reflect guest to pay. All right, and the next part of the release that I want to go over is selecting a reservation or going to a reservation from the CC transaction screen. So for those properties that may collect deposits up front, or maybe want to go in and check your authorizations for that particular day, we do have the option of going to the menu option, financials, and CC transactions. This will always give you payments and authorizations for that particular day. As you can see here on the top left, this is my current date, which is October 15th. I have the payments tab on the right-hand side along with my authorizations tab. I also have approved and declined transactions. If I click here on approved, anytime you see a chevron arrow, that means there's more information to break down. If I click here on approved, you can see that I actually have a transaction, or maybe one or two transactions from Visa, totaling $848. If I break down this $848, you can see two separate transactions. I have one of the guest names, Tyrus McGlone. I have Angelica Villas for the second guest name. I have the balance on the far right-hand side with the authorization code used to collect that payment. And in the middle of the screen, you'll see a reservation ID, which is a confirmation number. I can actually click on this ID number here, and it takes me to the guest stay card. And again, this balance will reflect here as guest balance. This is the in-house reservation, so it will reflect guest balance. If I go back to CC transactions, it places me in the exact screen that I left off on. This also works on authorizations as well. So payments and authorizations, as well as if it's a payment, it works on declined payments as well. All right, next I want to go over the availability calendar. So those of you that may be familiar with the bar or the best available rate for your properties, you have two classifications of the best available rate. Some people refer to best available rate as your bar, which is an actual rate code, and some people refer to best available rate as your lowest rate available in the property. If I come to the availability calendar in the top right-hand portion of the screen, I will see now that I have a bar rate listed here. Again, this is referred to as the best available rate for the property, which is the lowest rate available. Right now, it looks like the lowest rate I have available is actually more like a comp rate. This rate can be changed at any given time. Most properties will probably choose to have a rack rate listed here. If I break down the chevron arrow for best available rate, now if you had actual numerical values here, so far as maybe a rack rate, this will always show you the single occupancy value for that particular room type on that rate. All right. Going to the next and the last portion of this release, I want to discuss applied filters to any group functionality. I'm actually going to migrate over to a testing environment here called the Concourse City Hotel. So for those sales managers or managers in the property that may work with groups closely, if you come to the menu option, I'm going to come down to groups and manage groups. These are all groups in my hotel, whether it's a definite, whether it's a tentative group or canceled group. Any type of hold status will be listed here based on what your property has defined. So if I go to this drop down here, and let's say I only want to show tentative groups in my property. So these are 3 tentative groups in the property currently. If I were to go into, let's say, the Horizon group, and of course, it takes me to the group summary. If I go back to the groups tab, it actually places me back exactly where I left off, and it keeps and holds that same filter. This is a feature that we actually upgraded recently, of course, with this release, as we have noticed that a lot of customers, when you go back to a previous screen, you lose that filter. If you have a group functionality where maybe you have 3 pages of tentative groups, it actually places you back on that same page as well. So just to recap this, if you were to go to a filter, you will not lose that filter if you go from different pages. This was a fairly short release, so at this time, I'm going to hand it back over to Aaron for any questions that anyone may have.
All right, thank you, Tyrus, for the insightful presentation. I'd now like to take to the floor to answer some questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So our first question is from Mary Lou. Does the credit card transaction screen have a range of dates or only a single date search?
Good question, Mary Lou. So if you come to the financial screen here and go to CC transaction, you can go back and change this date. So it won't be a range, but you can go back and alter the date if you need to something in the past.
Great. And the next question is, can you change the best available rate to another rate on the availability calendar?
Absolutely. So if I were to come to my availability calendar here, like I said right now, this is showing a 0 rate, which is most likely a complimentary rate for the property, something that you may not want to offer or may not want to, display on the dashboard. I'm going to come to the menu option and come down to settings. Again, this is something that most managers should have access to because it is permission based. But I'm going to come to the rates menu on the far left hand side. I'm going to click on rate sequence in the middle of the screen. If you scroll down to the bottom right, you're going to see Rover dashboard. Again, you can see right now this is highlighted for my lowest rate, but I can come in and hit custom, and I can choose just, let's say, any other rate that may be available. So let's say if I want to choose, I might have an advanced purchase rate here, so an advanced deposit rate. Or if I wanted to choose the bar rate, which is the actual rate code in my property, I'm going to choose bar. and I'll save changes. Once I've saved changes, I'm going to come back to my dashboard. It's like we have frozen up here. Let's see. All right, so if I come back to my dashboard and come to the availability calendar again, you will see I now reflect my actual bar rate or maybe my rack rate. But again, yes, you can change that if you go to rates and rate sequence.
Great. And then the next question is, we take a lot of deposits. Typically, the full deposit is due at time of booking. What will the stay card reflect if a deposit was paid in full prior to check-in?
Good question. If you have a deposit that's already taken a full deposit, it will still reflect guests to pay. That amount will just be zero. So for example, if I come here to, I think my reservation here has a completed deposit. Oh, it does not. So this reservation at right now currently has a balance of $355. If I were to come in and take this deposit in full, $355 total, I'm going to make this payment. All right, so I've made the payment. I'm going to close down this screen here. And you'll see that it still reflects guest to pay, but it has changed the background color from red to green. So again, if you have an arrival reservation or a reservation that has not checked in, it will always say guest to pay, regardless whether the balance is zero or whether it's still something outstanding. If you have a reservation that is checked in, it's going to change from guest to pay and simply say guest balance. And again, that's not an in-house reservation or a departed reservation.
Great. Thank you, Tyrus. And I'll go ahead and wait a couple more seconds for anyone to enter last minute questions. All right, so since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. All right, so today we discussed the guest balance, guest to pay field added to the stay card. We reviewed how selecting a reservation from the CC transaction screen now directs users to the stay card, discovered how bar displays for all room types on the availability screen, and explored how applied filters will not reset upon selecting a group and returning to the result screen. With that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at erin.fisher@stayintouch.com. Thanks again.